Today we will do the formation of comparative and superlative. We will look at all the positive degrees of adjective, and then we'll see how in each case comparative and superlative degrees are formed from the positive. Okay? Now, there are several rules that we need to follow, but we do not need to remember the rules. It comes automatically as we write or read. That's why I said in the beginning, grammar may seem tough, but with practice, it becomes easy. So it is the practice of grammar, reading or writing of grammar, that will help us in the perfection of the words and in sentences. So the rule number 1 for the formation of comparative and superlative, that's what it is, formation. The first thing, the title is formation of the comparative and superlative. Comparative and superlative. And superlative. So we are looking at comparative and superlative degrees in their formation. In doing this, we need to be very, very careful. Okay, now, rule number 1 that I told you, there are 5 rules we are going to follow in the formation of comparative and superlative. So let's look at rule number 1. Rule number 1. Okay? We're going to look at rule number 1. What does the rule number 1 say? From the above, we learned the comparative is usually, so the comparative degree is usually formed by adding ER to the positive, and to the superlative, you add EST. That's the rule number 1. What's the rule number 1? The comparative usually is formed, the comparative is usually formed by adding what are we going to add? By adding ER to the positive. By adding ER to the positive. To the positive. And the superlative, so what are we going to add to the superlative? By adding EST. Adding EST to the positive. To the positive. And this is the first rule. Okay? The first rule. So, what are we going to do now? We're going to observe the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. Okay? So, all these adjectives, how is it formed? For the comparative, we will add ER, and to the superlative, we will add EST. So, now let's look at it. First one, positive, comparative, and superlative. Superlative, degrees of adjectives. Now, look at this. We are talking about the comparative. We are talking about the comparative degree is usually formed by adding ER to what? To the positive, and then the superlative. The superlative is formed by adding EST to the positive. Okay? So that's what we are going to do. Now, let's look at the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. Just look at it, and we'll put it to box here so that we remember correctly one look at it. Okay, now I'm going to write down the positive degree of comparison. First one, I have bold. The first one is bold. Okay, deep, high, high. Then we have strong, strong. Then thick, thick, and weak. We have here 6 positive degree of adjectives. Now we're going to change. We learned that to change into comparative, we add ER to the positive. So you have bolder. So they have first bold. You add ER. Second, deep, deeper. Third, high, higher. We'll write it in different color so that we'll remember better. Strong, stronger. Okay, stronger, thick, thicker. Then finally, we have weak, weaker. Okay, now I use a different color for us to see it very clearly. Now, so how do we form the comparative? By adding bolder, deeper, higher, stronger, thicker, and weaker. So, we form the comparative by adding ER to the positive. Now, let's take a look at the superlative. Here, we are adding EST to the positive to form the superlative degree. So, the first one, we have bold, bold, deep, high. Fourth one, strong, strong, thick. And finally, weak. To form the superlative, we add est to the positive. Now, I've done the positive here, and what are we adding? Est. So, boldest, boldest, deepest, then highest, then strongest, thickest, and weakest. Now here, we have formed, we said, formation of the comparative and the superlative degree of adjective. That's what we are doing. And the rule number 1 says, comparative is usually formed by adding er to the positive, and superlative is formed by adding est to the positive. And that's what we have done. Let's read it aloud so that we can, only when we read anything, when you read and you stress, then you remember, oh, sounds correct. Okay, now let's look at bold, bolder, deep, deeper, high, higher, strong, stronger, thick, thicker, weak, weaker. Now forming the superlative, bold, boldest, deep, deepest, high, highest, strong, strongest, thick, thickest, weak, weakest. So in the rule number 1, forming comparative, add er. Form the superlative, add est to the positive degree of adjective.